Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, Opie narrates his wife's obsession with her sister, Madison, leading to a complex web of deceit and betrayal. Discovering his wife's manipulation to sabotage Madison's relationship, he ends his marriage and finds solace in a newfound bond with Madison. The ex-wife's escalating behavior, including stalking and trespassing, culminates in a restraining order. The story underscores themes of jealousy, betrayal, and the resilience of familial bonds. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 27, had a major problem with comparing herself to her younger, prettier sister, Madison. Madison remained single and never gave up pursuing her dream career. She was quite successful and had a TikTok fan base, which just irritated the crap out of my wife. But she never admitted she felt this way about her sister. Sometimes she vented to me about it, but she always backdoored afterward by expressing love for Madison. My wife even went so far as to ask me while we were dating, and even after we were married, if I wished I met her sister instead. I always said, of course not, that I believed we were meant to be together, and she deserved to have a happy life apart from her sister, regardless of what she was doing with her life. Well, my wife never got the message I was trying to give. She kept stalking her sister and comparing our life to other people. However, on the phone to her sister directly, she was supportive and never gave any signs of jealousy. Everything really fell apart when Madison got engaged. We agreed to meet them for dinner, and of course, her fiancé was a well-together, successful man. They suited each other, and I was happy for them, but my wife wasn't. She pretended to be, but as soon as we got in the car, she started acting weird. She was quiet and on her phone more often. I was pretty sure she was stalking Madison's fiancé on social media. She started acting a little more friendly towards me again after a few days, and over the next 3 weeks, she met with her sister a few times without me while I was at work. The first time, she didn't tell me about it. I was working late, but I found out she left the house because the security alarm kept a time-stamped record of all our comings and goings. After she went out 2 more times, I asked her what was going on. She said she was meeting with Madison because she was starting to have second thoughts about trusting her fiancé. This didn't make sense to me because they looked happy and confident together when I met them. I started looking at Madison's Facebook while my wife was supposedly meeting with her. She looked fine with her man, and even posted happy wedding planning updates. I finally messaged her, asking if she was with her sister right now. She said no, and asked why. My heart sank, and I replied, explaining that she told me she'd been meeting with her a few times this week. I could tell she started to worry because she said her fiancé had been going to the gym much more often. She told me she was going to try calling him to see if he answered, but he didn't. We couldn't see either of their locations either. She went to the gym, but AP wasn't there. So without any other options, we waited for them to come home. Madison texted me that AP arrived at her house at the exact same time my wife pulled into her driveway. When she walked in, I freaked out. I tried to remain calm, but my voice started cracking, so I started yelling. I told her I knew she wasn't with her sister, and her fiancé was missing too. She actually had the nerve to accuse me of liking her sister after all, since I admitted to messaging her. Before I could say a word, she said that I could have her sister now because she wanted a divorce. I was absolutely shocked by the words she was saying. I told her I didn't like Madison. She only helped me to figure out she was lying to me. I demanded to know where she was and why she wanted a divorce now. She said Madison's fiancé, AP, loved her now. He realized how amazing she was compared to her little sister, who was fearing commitment. I looked her straight in the eye and told her she was crazy and cruel for taking her sister's man from her when they seemed so happy. I insulted her, so she slapped me and walked out the door with luggage she packed in advance. She was acting so ridiculous, like she thought AP and her were meant to be, and by leaving me as quickly as possible, she'd be with him forever. I called Madison and she answered it, even though she was in the middle of screaming at AP. I heard him crying and apologizing to her. She dismissed him and went into another room to tell me what he told her. That my wife persuaded him to meet with her a few times so she could get to know the man her sister was going to marry. She told him she wanted to keep it a secret from Madison and me because we would overreact. Then she convinced him to have intimate as some sort of messed up way to prove he was worthy of loving Madison. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was so messed up. I could only apologize to her on behalf of her sister because she ruined her plans to marry the man of her dreams. AP regretted it immediately and begged Madison's forgiveness. She was crying on the phone with me and I asked her what we should do. With barely a moment's hesitation, she told me she was dumping him. I told her I'd divorce my wife because neither of them deserved us. We made some kind of survival pact to get through this and come out wiser. 1 year later, Madison and I are seeing each other regularly. Our relationship is slowly turning into a romance. AP moved away as soon as he realized he wasn't going to get her forgiveness. He didn't even consider getting a place with my wife because she was only a mistake. When my ex realized that's how he felt about her and he was gone, she started calling me every day, several times a day, to beg me for a sleepover or coffee, cake, and a chat. I declined every time and only answered the phone if she wouldn't stop calling. She started camping in the yard, so I got restraining order after the divorce was final. She was camping in the yard when her sister came over to hang out with me and she lost her mind. I was prepared to call the police if she tried to come in the house, but thankfully she wasn't that much of a threat. Since she had to leave due to the restraining order and trespassing, I didn't hear from her again. Last update I heard was that her dad had to bail her out of jail for something stupid. Today's second story. In this story, Opie's life takes a drastic turn when he discovers his wife's infidelity after a seemingly ordinary day. Despite her denials, he uncovers the truth through a chance encounter and her GPS history. Confronted, she admits her betrayal tearfully. The marriage ends with the man gaining custody of their son. The aftermath is tumultuous, with family drama and emotional upheaval. Now let's get into the story. My whole life changed unexpectedly one night when my wife and 12-year-old son came home from an evening out. My son looked happy, like he had no idea anything was wrong. But his mother looked like she just bet her life savings on the horse that broke his leg right out of the gate. We've been married 14 years at this point, so I knew my wife's expressions, even the ones she thought she could hide. This day started off normal with us going to work and our son going to school. After school, she took him to baseball practice and any events afterward before returning home. Most of the time, I joined them at the baseball game after work, but this was the first time ever that I was asked to stay late. It didn't bother me too much, especially because it was a super rare occurrence. But when I saw how guilty my wife looked, I immediately wished I would have gone. After our son went upstairs, I asked her what was going on. She looked even more worried that I could tell something was wrong. She said nothing was wrong and everything was normal. I asked if he won the game, and she couldn't remember at first. I asked where they went afterwards, and she looked like she lied. When she said the usual pizza shop, I was highly suspicious. I knew she did something she didn't want me to know. I went upstairs and spoke with our son for a while about his day and game, but he didn't show any signs of something bothering him. I asked what they did after the game, and he said he rode in his friend's van to their house, leaving Mom at the field to pack up. Then she picked him up later, so they didn't go to the pizza shop at all, and my wife was alone for hours. I confronted my wife about her lies, and she said I was suspecting her of nothing and trying to unravel a mystery that didn't exist. She said she forgot to take some medicine that usually affects her memory, and it was that time of the month, so she didn't want me to pick a fight with her. I backed off because I learned a while ago to leave her alone at certain times. But I wasn't done investigating the inconsistencies. It wasn't until my son's next baseball game that I found out what really happened. I wasn't being an active sleuth, just a supportive father. When I went to the food stand, the volunteer there, a woman about 30 years old, asked if I was married to that woman right over there. I said of course and asked why she wanted to know. She said she wasn't sure if she was overstepping bounds, but she saw her the week prior leave with another man. My jaw dropped. I double-checked. She was actually talking about my wife. She said she knew it was her because I wasn't here last week, and it was the only time she saw her without me or our son. I asked if she knew what AP looked like, and she hesitated. She asked me to promise not to make a scene, so I did. She pointed out a tall, handsome fellow. He didn't have a wedding ring. It must have been some luck that right after I spotted him, I looked to my wife, who was looking at him, and then looked at me and tried to wave innocently. I walked back to her and played the role I was meant to play until we got home and were winding down to sleep. I knew I had to bring this up because I couldn't ignore it if my wife was cheating on me. I asked her for her phone first. The last time I did was so many years ago, I can't even remember why anymore. She was nervous but handed it to me plain dumb. The passcode was the same, and she didn't have any obvious conversations with another man. But I was mostly interested in her GPS history. She looked red and like. It was hard for her to breathe evenly. I asked why she was nervous, and that only made it worse. She snapped and said she wasn't, but she was. Gasped. She asked me if something was wrong, and I said yes. She looked like she was going to lose her mind. I found her trip history, and it showed her travels that week prior when she went with another man. I asked her why she went to his address, and she was stunned and speechless. There was no lie she could tell because I was going to. She knew I could go knock on his door and find out that he's a single father who attends the same baseball games and knows my wife better than he should. After I stared at her for 45 seconds waiting for a response, she broke from scared stiff to full-on sobbing. Her whole body was heaving while she said she knew she messed up. She said he just asked her out for coffee, but drove her to his house instead. His house was probably a 30-minute walk back to her car, which was parked at the baseball field. I asked her why she didn't walk away or run away or call me when she realized he wasn't taking her for coffee. She just shrugged and said she believed him when he said he had coffee in his house. They sat on his couch, and when he put his coffee down, arm around her, and started kissing her neck, she didn't stop him. By looking at her, I could tell her world was ending, and she couldn't blame anyone but herself. She couldn't bring herself to lie about it either. She felt so bad and guilty for going along with this guy's seduction. She couldn't face our new reality. I sat on the bed with her and cried too. But this wasn't a sign of weakness or potential forgiveness for her. I knew we were done, and I was crying because it was all gone so easily. I dreaded our child's new reality, but I didn't let myself think negatively for very long. My parents divorced when I was young, so I chalked it up to history repeating, and I knew I turned out okay. I looked into her eyes and told her to get out of my house. She continued wailing like I was hurting her deeply. I told her she had 30 minutes to pack before I called one of her relatives for help getting her out. Well, that time passed and that none of her relatives would come help her pack in the middle of the night. I called her father and told him what was going on. He asked me to forgive her just this once, but I said no. He said he'd be there in the morning to help her get out. So I locked myself in our son's room and slept on the floor. I was thankful she left us alone. The next morning, my son woke me up and said there was a commotion outside. I looked out and saw my F. I lewing with AP. My wife was bringing stuff out and putting it in AP's car. I went outside and watched my F-file punch AP. I couldn't believe my wife got AP involved. She expressed regret to me, but when I didn't forgive her, she went straight to him within a few hours. I wasn't very surprised Phil punched him. She was screaming, being dramatic and immature like she proved herself to be. Our son stood by my side watching the drama unfold. When my wife saw her son, it looked like she died a little. She didn't want any of this to be happening. She was just trying to secure her future with the only option she had. It was no surprise that I won custody in the divorce, and our son didn't want to start visitation for a while. I let her come over a few times for dinner after all this blew over. It was awkward, but also kind of nice because my son liked us being together. AP kicked my wife out after 5 months anyway, So her father was called again to take her back under his roof for the first time in 15 years. It was a life outcome none of us should have had to face. But it became our reality because of my wife's selfish decision to go with another man. If anyone is reading this who's considering cheating on their spouse, don't do it. You'll have consequences. The truth always comes out. And when the worst thing that ever happened to you is no one's fault but your own, it will be a very hard thing to cope with. My ex routinely visits a behavioral and mental health clinic.